The wait is over. The Eastern Conference Finals are here tonight. Game 1. What will be the most important thing besides the result that happens in Game 1? Who has improved more between the Pacers and Knicks? Can the Pacers win on the road again? We're talking about all of it today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Wednesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, if you're watching on YouTube, you know where I am in Cambridge again. I just live here now, and we're talking Pacers Knicks. It is officially game day. What a wait it was. I wonder how much the Pacers players have had their emotions about this game percolating, sitting, bubbling, ready to go. It's finally time. The West started last night. I'm recording this before that happened. It's the conference finals. It's one of the most fun times on the NBA calendar, and the Pacers will have a chance to win their first conference finals game in over a decade. The Knicks in over 2 decades. It's going to be a blast. We'll talk about game 1, including my many thoughts on the first game of series is who's improved more. What I think is the most important thing to look out for tonight specifically as it relates to the development of the series. Can the Pacers win on the road again? They talked about that on Locked On NBA today. We'll talk about that clip as well. So much to get to. Look, if you listen every day to this podcast, we've done one every day in the playoffs. You've heard my thoughts on why I think game 1s are so important. I understand that I could just look at the odds and tell you what percentage of the time a team wins game 1 wins the series. That is certainly part of it. I just feel like it's more than that. It's so much tone setting of what's going to happen, who's guarding who, what strategies, what tempo, what's the series going to look like? How's it going to feel? How are the adjustments going to be dictated? What team has the upper hand? I get that it's the numbers just spell that out for you, but doesn't it feel different? Every game in the playoffs already has that feeling of when you win, you're on top of the world. When you lose, the sky's falling. You're never going to win again. But game 1 specifically just adds this extra weight to me where the team that wins feels like they've solved everything, and the team that loses feels like they have to change everything and go back to the drawing board. The Pacers have won both their games 1 this year. They lost both of their games 1 last year. It's just how it goes. You can overcome it and lose. They lost all 3 of their game 1s last year. Excuse me. It's going to be a huge deal again. I'm not going to go through my whole spiel on all the things that stand out to me about a game 1 again, but that's the gist of it. And in this one, the thing that I think it's going to come from that, whether it's talking about adjustments, whether it's talking about changes or strategy, is something Rhett Bauer and I talked about yesterday when we got off track talking about advantages, and that's who's guarding who, right? That's going to be something I talk about a lot this series and changes. Who's guarding my phone? All that kind of things, right? I made my prediction for the Pacers, but I already am kind of teetering on if I think I'm going to be right. Right. I think it's going to be, I thought about it for a while. I watched games from this year. I think it's going to be Nembhard on Brunson, Nesmith on Karl Towns, Myles Turner on Mikal Bridges, Tyrese Haliburton on Josh Hart, and Pascal Siakam on OG Anunoby. But I also understand Myles Turner on Josh Hart and Tyrese Haliburton on Mikal Bridges because of what other teams have done to the Knicks, where their center guards Josh Hart. And by guard Josh Hart, I mean doesn't guard Josh Hart and is instead other places on the court. And then puts a wing or a guard on Cat to switch more easily when he's setting a bunch of screens and stuff like that. And that's how he gets some rebounds. But that general strategy has worked against just the Knicks pure starting 5, a group that I've talked about their net ratings, and Gavin talked about it with me on Monday. I'm not going to regurgitate too much of all that stuff. That's where my heart went at first doing this. I thought more about it though, and everybody knows this. Everybody remembers this from last year's series. Andrew Nembhard, great defender, has had a nice playoffs with Dame and Mitchell, right? I think the best defender on the Pacers, particularly on the perimeter. If you want to say it's Myles Turner, I give Myles Turner. I don't remember who I gave the defensive player of the year to the Pacers this year. Myles Turner's a great defender too. If you think it's him, that's fine. Nembhard on Brunson last year didn't work, right? He is the kind of player that Brunson just does. The way he already can make difficult shots. And so if you subtract some inches of height from his defender, those already difficult shots become a little easier. He's already mastered getting to whatever spot he wants, using the resources available on the floor, whether it's space, whether it's a screen, whether it's his angles, his own ball handling ability. He is so good at all that stuff that, Nembhard's very pesky. Nembhard's very good. They put him on Brunson a lot of the series last year, but it wasn't working very well. Brunson was amazing to start the series. They put Nesmith on him, And the reason I think that they'll start with Nembhard this year, I still think my gut says that's going to be what happens, is because Nembhard's a better defensive player than he was last year. He's got that chair pull thing going for him now, right? He's just mastered a few more techniques. His synergy with Turner and pick and roll defense is better. Like, he's just better as a defensive player. And so I think they go back to giving him that assignment. But what they went to Nesmith last year, it was just a little bit better because of all that stuff I mentioned earlier. It's just a little bit more size for Brunson to have to shoot over, or for him to hesitate and think around, right? And that's what it stood out to me about, I think it was game 3, the first time the Pacers went to that last year's series, was Brunson still had a nice game. It was just harder for him to do it. And like all the stuff the Knicks were doing in a game that they could flow into, they could get to it, but it took like a half second longer, because there's just a little more size or a little more hesitancy. And of course, their matchups are different elsewhere. So the Knicks had to read that stuff too. Some of it was that it was a change that they had to work through, and some of it was just that Nesmith did a good job using his size. And so I wonder if it's possible that Nesmith does start the series on Jalen Brunson. Again, the Pacers showed last year that it worked better for them. Then you have to build backwards with, like, where does Andrew Nembhard go now? What's the best way to use his ability? And then you could put him maybe on, Mikal Bridges, who I almost just called Michael, which is why I just paused for way too long of time. But then if he's on Bridges, or you put Myles Turner, okay, are you putting him on Hart? Okay, who are you putting on Cat? You can't put Haliburton on OG or Cat. It just becomes hard to build it backwards when I feel like the only options they have to be comfortable with Tyrese Haliburton are Mikal Bridges or Josh Hart. And so you have to work. I think you have to start with the weak link. In this case, that's Tyrese Haliburton, and go from there. If they can find a way to put Nesmith on Brunson and have Haliburton where they want him, I think they'd be okay with that. And so it would not shock me if that is a way that they started this, because finding the right spot for Tyrese Haliburton is a little challenging. It would also not shock me if the Pacers don't immediately copy what other teams are doing with this wing on a big and big on Josh Hart thing, and guard it a little more traditional at first, just to see how it goes. Gavin was explaining that sometimes when a guard is on Towns, the Knicks don't go to him as much. There's just a lot of wrinkles to guarding the Knicks that have evolved throughout the season that the Pacers will have to figure out, right? It's not as easy as this guard your man, right? It's possible that all 5 positions are guarding not what you'd consider their traditional position to start this series. And so that is the thing that I think I will take the most away from game 1, just strategically, is who's on who, how does it evolve even throughout one game, right? We saw TJ McConnell's on Kevin Porter in game 1 of Pacers Bucks. That lasted a quarter, right? It might not even be from the start of the game to the middle of the game, who's on who, but all that stuff is going to be the most fascinating part of game 1. And then from that, who does well in those matchups and who does not, because like pretend one guy does bad and the other 4 do well. You're not going to change that one guy off. You just might worry that the other team would go back to that matchup more in the next game, for example, or something like that, right? So that will be very, very fascinating to me. And that's also a two-way street, right? I'm obviously covering the Pacers side. I'm very curious about how they'll defend, but like the other way around, who's Jalen Brunson on? Who's Cat on, right? I thought it'd be Turner when I talked about this with Rhett yesterday. I called that a potential Pacers advantage. Brunson's probably going to be on Nesmith, maybe Nembhard. Regardless, the Pacers will probably use that guy as a ball handler / screener very often. Nesmith, a way better play finisher than last year at this time. That will be interesting to me too. Who are they on, and which one of them, if any, pops in a way that the Knicks either have to change things up to solve something, or in a way that they have to figure out how to adjust their defense to cover for that issue, and then the Pacers keep responding from there. And so because these two teams have such unique offensive talent and defensive weaknesses, I've talked about this to death, but everybody's going to be cross-matching. Very few people will be guarding themselves. The transition game is going to be huge because of that, because guys are going to have to find their man and not the guy who's guarding him. It's going to be all very complicated. The transition battle might just be how this is settled. But the reason I think that is my story of game 1 is what doesn't work and what does work will tell the story of where the series goes. Who needs to move to someone else? Which team needs to make a lineup change? Who doesn't need to move? What team is happy with their plan because they won, or they won convincingly, right? That will tell the story of the early part of the series and where the adjustments go. There's obviously a million strategic things that factor into every series, but that to me will be the telling part of how this starts. And it will be a telling part of what the teams think of certain players, right? Whoever Jalen Brunson is guarding, that's who they think is the worst Pacers offensive starter, most likely, unless there's a different strategic thing going on, right? Do the Pacers think that what other teams have done against the Knicks is the right way? Or do they think, they got to cover for Haliburton in some other way, so they're not going to do that off the start of the series? Do they believe in Nembhard's growth enough? All this stuff is so fascinating to me, and it'll be what I personally probably carry the most weight out of in terms of tactics out of game 1. And yet I guarantee you Thursdays podcast, Fridays, maybe even Wednesdays, fresh out of the game, we'll be talking about what worked and didn't from those and how that can evolve throughout the series. I want to talk about something I wrote, some other stuff from game one that's going to be fascinating to me, and so much more on today's Locked On Pacers. Who's improved more to you of the Pacers and Knicks? We'll talk about that here in just a moment. Before we get to that, let's talk about Skims. When I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try. Let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear. Fit, comfort, just finding the right style can be tricky for everybody. Skims will change all that. Their men's line offers something for everybody, from boxer briefs to classic briefs. It's all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style, like their stretch brief. If you're a high school boxers guy, in college you switched to briefs, but you never knew that you were a briefs guy from various different parts of your life. Well, once you try the Skims stretch brief, there's no going back. Sleek, lightweight, super comfortable. Feels like wearing nothing at all, but you're still fully secure where it matters most. When it comes to underwear, Skims is the best to do it. Shop SKIMS Mens at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and at Skims stores. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Skims is the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA Basketball. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Locked On Knicks, of course, your second listen. Huge game coming for the Knicks as well. Their first conference finals game in a quarter century. Several players on both of these teams not born the last time the Knicks were in the conference finals. Just awesome run that this Knicks team is on from last year's time. Look, I've seen a lot of references to last year's series talking about this, and I actually used it as my lead in a story I'm about to bring up. I think it's very interesting to think back at that point and think the Pacers roster seems very similar. And so I think a lot of people have used that as their reason to say exactly this. I've seen this comment a lot from even Pacers fans, but a lot more Knicks fans, obviously, which makes sense. Well, the Knicks were so banged up. They're healthy this year. They've got better guys. Going off last year's series, they should win. And I get why you'd think that, but let's actually talk about that, because the teams were pretty even last year in general before that seventh game where the Pacers won by 21. After 6 games, it was Pacers 677, Knicks 670, right? It was basically a 1-point margin per game for 6 games. These teams were dead even last year throughout much of that series until the Pacers just whomped them in Game 7. It wasn't close. They deserve a ton of credit for that. And so to me, the way that series flowed and the way that the Knicks' health status was, and the Pacers deserved to win, they were better, now leads me to a question that I have that will define the series. One team 150, one game's one team 150. That's one bad break away from them being the same level of regular season team this year. They have a lot of very similar stats, right? Advanced metrics, efficiency, net rating, all that kind of stuff. So it's hard to separate them on a lot of those, last year's series factors, this year's regular season factors. They're both very good in the clutch, right? They both have different strengths and weaknesses, and that will end up defining the series, is whose strengths and weaknesses look better. But what my question was that I wrote about was, who's improved more from last year? Because it's very easy to say, the team that, like the Knicks, if they've improved even a little, should win because the series was so tight last year. But the Pacers have also improved. And that's why that argument about they were so banged up, they're healthy now, they have better talent, they're just going to win, falls apart to me. I get looking at the Pacers roster and seeing these are the same players. How much better are they? And their record's only 2 wins more, right? That all is too narrow, right? Since the season flipped to January, they've been spectacular. Even earlier than that, right? Right after the NBA Cup, the Pacers record, top 5 in the league, better than the Knicks in terms of win percentage, right? And at some point that grip matters. That is a significant amount of time. I almost said insignificant, which is wrong. That is a significant amount of time to say, okay, they're better than their record. I think the same thing about Minnesota. They got Julius Randle back. They're better than their record. They're in the conference finals. Julius Randle was awesome down the stretch. So there's a lot of indicators about the Pacers being the same team from last year, just wrong. The reason that they thought they'd be better this year is they ran it back. Chemistry is going to be easier. They had Pascal Siakam for 41 more games than they did last season. It ended up being 37, but whatever. And then internal development, right? How's that going to carry them? They have so many lesser experienced guys in their rotation. You can count Tyrese Haliburton in that group if you want. It's only his 5th season, but the 25 and under crew has Haliburton and Nembhard and Nesmith and Mathurin, and for times Isaiah Jackson, Obi Toppin's in his 5th year, even though he's 27. Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd, lots of guys who you could count as inexperienced, who certainly are young, who fit that group. The real bet for the Pacers was that those guys would be better. And I did that podcast with Kyle Taylor a couple of months ago about who's actually better and at what. And we said, yeah, most of them are better at some things. Is it a huge jump? Is it not a huge jump? Whatever. In the playoffs, a lot of them have looked better. Andrew Nembhard's been way better than last year. And we said he was the most improved player of the group during the season. Nesmith is better. Mathurin's fitting in enough to call him better, especially at better the things they need him to be better at, right? They're getting something from Walker at times when he plays. Ben Shepherd, probably about the same. Toppin, probably about the same. I'm missing one for some reason in my head. Whatever. Lots of young guys, and most of them have improved. So saying they're the same as last year doesn't hold up. They're a better team because those same players are better. That's the point of young players in the NBA. They get better. And the veterans have largely stayed the same. Turner is even playing a little better. Siakam has maintained, maybe even improved his level because he's had time to fit into the Pacers system. They have Thomas Bryant now. McConnell's the exception to that. He's very hit and miss this season, this playoffs, whatever. But I bring all that together to say the Pacers are better than a lot of their numbers show, than a lot of their stats from last series show. So it's not as easy to just say those things about the Knicks. However, it is easy to say that the Knicks are better too. They have Mikal Bridges. They have Karl Anthony Towns, who has solved all his playoff bugaboos from early in his career, who is so much better at the things he used to stink at, who fits very well with this Knicks team that wants to crash the offensive glass and spreads it out just enough. Great fits. Campaign, great addition. Perfect eighth man, right? They're better. They are. And they're healthier, which is obviously a huge part of this. Congrats to the Knicks training staff on their Training Staff of the Year award. Well-deserved. That, they're also better. They've improved slightly on offense. Their defense and their style have taken hold. The Pacers are 10 spots better in defensive rating from last year to this year. The Pacers have the best offense in the league in the playoffs, but they're the worst team left on defensive rating. The Knicks are the worst team left on offensive rating, but their defense is very good. I'm talking in circles. I just wrote this story to say there's a lot about the Pacers and Knicks that are the same but different from last year. And the series through 6 games was so close that to me, the winner of this series is going to be the team that has improved the most. And that's up to your interpretation. I picked the Pacers because I think they've improved the most, which is silly to say when you just look at the numbers, but not silly to say when you look at how good they've been for the last basically 60 games that they've played of time, including the playoffs. And you could even probably just use the last 60 games of the regular season, but they were 10-15, and then they've been incredible ever since. They've beaten a lot of good teams along the way, including crushing postseason opponents. The Knicks are obviously better than last year. I mean, nothing to diminish who they are and what they've been. That's why I picked a 7-game series. I think it's going to be close again. I think they are clearly better than last year. They're also healthier than last year. Their style is going to take hold in some of these games. They're going to win it. But to me, the team that's going to win this series is the team that is truly the most improved from last year, whether that is actually on basketball talent, or whether that's growth in experience, whether that's growth in clutch time success, whether that's growth in strategy, whether that's growth in a coach learning something new. That is the team that's going to win the series. And so I keep seeing so many references. Here's what happened in the playoffs last year. Here's the differences. Knicks win, right? I don't think that's a good way to think about it. Even if I thought the Knicks were going to win, I wouldn't think that'd be a good way to think about it. And so the team that improves more from last year is going to win the series. I can't wait. Will the Pacers win game 1 on the road again? They did it against the Cavs last year. They've done it before. What's going to happen? It's the Garden. It's as tough as it gets. Let's talk about that to close this one out. Before we do that, we got to talk about CarGurus. Shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting, but between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. That's why I love CarGurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, CarGurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the U.S. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second-guessing yourself. If you need a deal you can trust, CarGurus makes it easy to compare vehicles side by side. They give you price drop alerts. They have in-depth vehicle details. SimilarWeb estimated traffic data shows CarGurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site. So buy or sell your next car today at CarGurus with CarGurus.com. Go to CarGurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's CarGurus.com. CarGurus.com. Back here on Locked On Pacers, the final segment of this podcast before the Eastern Conference Finals. Finally, real games. I hope you guys have enjoyed 8 days of podcasts between series. I think I've exhausted about every point I wanted to make about the Pacers or Knicks. The only one I haven't said yet that I will say here is the clutch time play is going to be fun. Pacers 5-0 in clutch games in the playoffs this year. Knicks 6-2. Nobody else has more than 4 wins in crunch time in this playoffs. These teams have been great in those moments. Haliburton has 2 game winners and miracle comebacks. Brunson has his own game winners at the free throw line from 3. Nasty stuff, right? They've been awesome. Awesome. They both will be confident in those moments. I think they'll be really fun if there's a tight game. Both these teams won over 60% of their clutch games in the regular season. They have experience. Expect some swagger. I love it. Both of these teams not afraid of the moment, and both these teams not afraid of the venue. Make your second listen Locked On Thunder or Locked On Wolves over one game one. It's about to start. I'm at the Fever game, which is also about to start. So hopefully this segment doesn't go super long. I'm going to miss too much of that game against the Atlanta Dream. Also, I've been asked many times, Tony, you should start a Fever podcast. Keep your ears up. It might be coming. Let's continue here. It's the Garden. It's game one. I've seen one. I've already complained about this. I've seen one too many. Can the Pacers handle the Garden things? Yeah, they won. They literally won a game there. Like last year, I was there. Like, it's harder, but it's doable. They did it. It will be awesome to see that setting again, especially this is the first conference finals game there in a long time. It's going to be awesome, right? Can the Pacers win game one? Heck yes. They have started off series extremely well this year. And I think the reason for that, and the reason that their time off is going to help them so much heading into the series, is they're a hard team to prepare for. And I know I've mentioned this a lot, but it really hit me hard as something I should keep in the back of my head and try to, remember as a talking point when Donovan Mitchell was talking about preparing for the Pacers and their pace, literally their pace. They can sit in the Cavs film room or in practice, and Kenny Atkinson can say whatever he wants. They're going to play fast. Be ready to play fast. They're going to play fast. Here's the clips of them playing fast. Here's what it looks like. That's all great. You can't practice like that. If you're not used to it, it's hard to practice doing that or playing against it. And then it comes out and it happens, and you get used to it, but you're already on the back foot by that point. The Pacers have had that work well for them in both of their game ones. The Bucks, they played pretty well. The Cavs game one, they shot it very well and were pretty fast for most of the game, but not the whole game. I thought Bucks game one, their pace was good the whole night, but after Bucks game one, they're like, yeah, we got to be faster. The Pacers thought, yeah, our pace needs to be better. It's still a huge thing for them, even in even in victory. They want to play faster. They want to play Pacers basketball. They want to buck the adage of the game slowing down in the playoffs. And so that style has suited them well, and it's hard to prepare for, which is part of why I think they've been so good in game ones. Is last year, their game ones were Milwaukee, their first playoff game ever as a team, right? Lights were bright. They were terrible. Game one in the Garden, even bigger setting. Lights were bright. They were terrible. And then they played in Boston and gave the game away that they could have won. They were better for 47 minutes. Right? They got better at game one throughout that playoffs. And this year they're showing it. They have the experience. They're used to the setting. They're used to the venues, and they're good, and they're hard to prep for. It's going to be a big game one. If they can win it for the reasons I said earlier, they'll have a higher percent chance of winning the series. On one hand, if they win, they steal home court advantage. I will say that line if they win, because it does mean something. I think home court advantage is becoming overrated. A lot of road wins in the playoffs this year. A lot of road wins in the playoffs this year. Teams are better. Officiating's better. I know a lot of people are going to groan about that. I think so. It doesn't mean as much. It's so important. And winning any game is important. So can the Pacers win game one? Yeah, they can. They already won a game one on the road against a very good team. Matt Moore was on Locked On NBA earlier today, and he thinks the Pacers are going to win game one. Here's what he said.
Pacers are going to take game one versus the Knicks. It's going to be a shocker for the Knicks fans that were so excited and losing their minds and making the conference finals, and rightfully so. It's going to celebrate things, but the Pacers.
Yeah, Pacers are better. In fact, the full clip, he said the Pacers are a punk rock troupe of absolute marauders, and they're going to waltz in MSG and spray paint Pacers for life all over the place. I would not recommend that. There's a lot of security there, but I love that phrasing. That's what they do, man. They just come in and they take your lunch money and they leave. It's going to be awesome. And the Knicks are tough and physical and have this style that can shape a game too. And it's very possible that the Pacers are unprepared for that, right? Last year they were fighting tough with the Knicks for the whole game one. And, the story of that game ended up being like a kicked ball and an illegal screen, unfortunately, because it was a really good game. But that's what these game ones can be. These little margins matter so much. The Pacers have had more time to prep. They've had more time to prep for the Knicks, even if they were splitting time 50-50 between the Knicks and Celtics for a couple days. They just have, right? They have an advantage in that way, but they're on the road. They absolutely can win this game. It's very important. It's all going to be so fascinating. The other part of this that I briefly mentioned earlier that I think is going to define a lot of these games beyond the matchups is just the exact opposite emphases. Is that a word? It's not. That these teams will have with their strategic edges, right? We talked about the pace yesterday with Rhett. Pacers want to play so fast, up and down, fast, boom, boom, random offense. We love this. It's so hard to prep for. And that's great. And if you can get enough stops to play fast, or you can get into your offense quickly every trip as much as you can. There it is, right? In the playoffs, the Pacers have a 99.3 pace. That's the third highest of the 16 teams. The Grizzlies are above them. They're out. Who cares? And the Knicks pace in the playoffs is 8th, right? Slower, much slower. In the regular season, that gap was even wider. Pacers pace in the regular season was 7th at 100.8. The Knicks was 26th at 97.6. Very different teams. That's 4 possessions a game. That's a possession a quarter. That doesn't sound like much. It is. It's a lot. That's like a whole turnover on a play in a Pacers game, for example, right? It's going to be fascinating to see how the pace battle shifts in these games. The other difference is how they get there. The Knicks want their possessions to come from their offensive rebounds. They're going to crash. The Pacers do struggle with that in terms of getting into their own offense when teams crash. That happened last year against the Knicks a lot. The Pacers want to get out and run. They want to get back on defense. There's just a lot to it with them in terms of how they try to combat rebounding, right? They have different focuses in that way, right? Their pace, all of these things that these teams are different. Obviously, the depth, the way they use their benches, those differences will also be fascinating and how they define the series, right? Which team's choices prove to be better? Is there a game where the Knicks win the rebounding battle by 15 and they just win right there on the spot? Is there a game where the Pacers win the transition points battle 18-5 and they win the game right there on the spot? Is there a game where McConnell or Mathurin or Toppin is exceptional and the Pacers have 6 or 7 great players and they win that game on the spot? Or is there a game where the bench is terrible and the Knicks win on the spot because their starters are good? All these differences add up to big things, right? It's going to be so much like, what are you willing to give up of who you are stylistically to win a game? It's going to be relevant in a lot of these games in this series, including game 1, the matchups, the differences, the crunch time, the Garden. Let's go. You could probably tell I'm running out of stuff to preview this series. There's been so many good ones. Locked On Knicks, of course. Kalen Cooper and Samson Folks series preview was fantastic. Setting the Paces preview was very good. You got to check all this stuff out. Be ready to go. It's tonight. Tomorrow, of course, game 1 recap. I'll be in the Garden. I hope to record there. We'll see how it goes. Rules-wise and where I'm allowed to go in the conference finals. I'm not sure what the differences are from round to round, but certainly will be different. So we'll see. Hopefully I can record there, though. And then Thursday, we'll do a guest in between games 1 and 2, and then game 3, of course, in the Garden. And I'll be back in Indy for everything after that. Can't wait. Hope you guys enjoyed the shows between rounds and enjoyed this one. You can find me on Blue Sky and Twitter at Tony R. East. This podcast is on Instagram and Twitter at Locked On Pacers. Back tomorrow, talking game 1. Let's go. It's finally here. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you very soon.